It's been years since I've seen the signpost, worn out and leaning to the side, announcing Crystal Pines, our once beloved summer haven. Now, with the 8 of us packed into 2 cars, the feeling is almost surreal. We're headed to the old cabin where we grew up and spent our summers, where we laughed, cried, and told ghost stories. Remember the summer of '05? Jenna asks, her eyes shining with nostalgia in the rearview mirror. When we almost burned down the cabin trying to make s'mores indoors? Laughter erupts from all corners of the car. Memories like these have kept us sane for the long drive, filling the spaces between us that the years have stretched out. I smile at the thought of our younger selves, so wild and free. As we pull up to the cabin, nostalgia hits me like a wave. The cabin is nestled in the middle of the forest, surrounded by towering pine trees. The place looks exactly how I remember it, yet so different. The cabin itself is a rustic structure. It's built from aged logs that have weathered countless storms, its roof sloping unevenly. A brick chimney, weathered and overgrown with ivy, juts out from one side. The front door, painted a peeling red, is as inviting as it ever was, even with its creaking hinges. The once vibrant blue window shutters have faded over the years, now a patchy mix of old paint and exposed wood. The once manicured path leading up to the cabin is now overgrown, the flagstones almost completely hidden by tall grass and weeds. Vines climbed the exterior walls of the cabin, snaking their way upwards in a chaotic organic lattice that wasn't there before. And for the porch, one of the wooden planks is still loose, just like when we used to come here all those years ago. It's more dilapidated than I remember, but still standing. The swing tied to the big oak tree is frayed and hanging by a thread, the old wooden seat looking like it could disintegrate at any moment. As I take it all in, the memories flood back. We were kings and queens of this place once, but now it's clear that nature has claimed it back. There's a sense of isolation I don't remember from our childhood, a quiet that pervades the air, broken only by the distant rustling of leaves and the sporadic calls of forest creatures. Max is the first to step towards the cabin, pushing open the red door. It creaks in protest, the rusty hinges groaning with age. A cloud of dust billows out as we wait for a moment, allowing the stale air to escape. Then, one by one, we follow Max inside. The interior is just as I remember. Warm wooden walls decorated with faded family photos and random antiques, mismatched furniture that each tell a story of a summer past, the smell of aged wood, and a hint of the pine forest outside. Our old rooms are just as we left them, filled with remnants of our younger selves. I smile as I pick up an old comic book from my bedside table, the pages yellowed with age. The bunk beds creak under our weight just like they used to. There's a comfort in the familiarity, a sense of coming home. As we start unpacking, the cabin slowly begins to come alive. The crackle of the fireplace, the sound of laughter echoing off the walls, the soft strumming of a guitar that Alex unpacked from his bag. We fill the spaces with our presence, brushing off the years of emptiness. Lisa and Jenna busy themselves in the kitchen, filling the cabin with the aroma of cooking food. We gather in the living room, our old meeting spot. The room is lit by the soft glow of the fire and filled with the sound of soft music and clinking glasses. Seeing them all again is like stepping back into an old photograph. There's Max, the unofficial leader of our group. He's filled out a bit over the years, his once messy hair now tamed and slicked back. Beside him is Jenna. She's always been the most adventurous of us, with a spirit as untamed as the winds of the mountains. Her freckles have faded, but her fiery red hair is just as vibrant as ever. She still wears that infectious smile that could light up even the darkest room. Next to Jenna is Lisa. She's always had a grace about her, a quiet strength that held us together during our craziest adventures. Strumming a guitar, he's grown his hair long, his fingers deftly plucking at the guitar strings as we reminisce. Then there's Ben and Rachel, the inseparable duo. We used to tease them about being joined at the hip. Now they've gone from best friends to a married couple, but they still have that same synchrony, the same unspoken understanding that has always defined them. Rounding up our group is Sarah. She's now a successful novelist. Her love for stories turning into a career. The sun is slowly sinking below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. As darkness begins to shroud the cabin, we gather around the fire pit outside. The firewood crackles as the flames dance up into the twilight, casting a warm, inviting glow. The flames flicker and twist, sending long, dancing shadows across our faces. Alex, seated across from me, prods at the fire with a stick. The firelight reflects off his face, highlighting his thoughtful expression. "You know, I almost didn't come," he admits. His gaze remains locked on the fire. "I don't know. Too different." Lisa gives him a reassuring smile. "But it's not, right?" she questions, her gaze searching his. "It's the same. We're the same." "Yeah," Alex responds, attempting to mirror her smile, but there's a note of uncertainty in his voice that doesn't escape me. As the night stretches on, the cabin is filled with our laughter and chatter. We share stories of our past, drink like we're teenagers sneaking alcohol for the first time, and sing songs that were once the anthems of our youth. It's a beautiful reliving of the past. It's almost perfect, almost like the old times. Yet beneath the laughter and the warmth of shared memories, there's a nagging feeling in my gut, an unsettling unease I can't shake off. The woods around us, once a place of adventure and exploration, seem to carry a different air, one of anticipation. It feels as though the trees are watching us. The silence of the forest feels loaded, as though it's holding its breath, waiting. But waiting for what? I'm not sure. The night stretches on, our laughter fading into the stillness, replaced by the sounds of the forest. I catch a glimpse of Alex as he rises from his seat. "I need some fresh air," he announces, wandering off into the darkness. We don't think much of it. But after about an hour, a sense of unease begins to settle over us. Max finally stands up. "He's been gone for too long," he says, his voice echoing the worry I've been trying to suppress. Jenna nods, a determined look on her face. "We need to look for him. He can't have gone far." There's a collective nod of agreement, our light-hearted reunion taking on a more serious. With our flashlights in hand and our hearts heavy with concern, we split into pairs. Max and Sarah, Jenna and Ben, Rachel and I. The forest is different at night. The gentle rustle of the leaves is replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional night creature stirring. The soft glow of our flashlights pierces through the darkness, our voices calling out Alex's name, her voice echoing through the trees. There's a note of desperation creeping into our calls, our worry intensifying with each passing minute. Rachel and I trek deeper into the woods, our flashlights sweeping over the moss-covered trees and underbrush. "Alex," I call, trying to keep my voice steady. "If you can hear us, please respond." But our calls are met with silence, our flashlights illuminating only the empty wilderness. It feels as though the forest is swallowing our words. After what feels like hours, we return to the cabin, each pair carrying the same news, no sign of Alex. As the first rays of morning light peek through the cabin windows, casting long shadows on the wooden floor, we've all but given up hope. The absence of Alex hangs heavy in the air. The cabin, once filled with joy and nostalgia, feels empty without him. Our worry is morphing into panic, a gnawing sensation that eats at our composure when the door to the cabin creaks open. We all turn. There, backlit by the rising sun, is Alex. But the relief that washes over us is short-lived. There's something noticeably different about him. His usually vibrant eyes now seem distant, as if looking at something far away. As Alex steps into the cabin, his face strangely impassive, our bombardment of questions fill the air. "Alex, where the hell were you?" Max demands, the relief evident in his voice. "We've been searching all night." Alex shrugs, not meeting Max's eyes. "Got lost, I guess." "Got lost?" Jenna scoffs. crossing her arms over her chest. "You know these woods better than anyone." "Yeah, well." Alex's voice trails off, his gaze distant. He seems lost in his thoughts. "You had us worried, Alex." Lisa chimes in, her voice soft, concern lacing her words. "Are you feeling all right?" He gives her a small nod. "Yeah, just tired." "You sure you're okay, man?" Ben asks, squinting at Alex as if trying to figure him out. "Yeah," Alex responds, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. "I said I'm fine." His response sends a hush over the group. It's unusual for Alex to snap. We exchange glances, our confusion and worry reflected in each other's eyes. "All right, let's give Alex some space," I say, attempting to diffuse the tension. "We're all tired. Let's get some breakfast going." Reluctantly, the others nod and we move toward the kitchen, leaving Alex standing by the doorway. As I take one last glance at him, I can't help but feel a knot of unease. This isn't the Alex we know, and I can't shake off the feeling that something is terribly wrong. Alex's strange behavior becomes increasingly evident. He sits apart from us during breakfast, his plate largely untouched. The Alex we know would have been in the middle of it all, cracking jokes, laughing. But this Alex is silent, his gaze vacant. We decide to hike down to the river. It's a spot where our younger selves spent countless hours swimming and indulging in wild, carefree adventures. As we approach the river, I can almost hear the echoes of our laughter and see the ghosts of our past selves splashing in the water. Alex, always the most enthusiastic of us all, would usually be the first to dive in, his joyous yell echoing off the trees as he plunged into the cool water. He'd surface with a wide grin, beckoning us all to join him in the summer ritual. But today, he remained standing on the riverbank. His eyes, usually filled with mischief and joy, are fixed on the water's surface, a deep frown etched on his face. "Hey, Alex, you coming in?" I call out, my voice echoing against the trilling song of the river. I try to infuse as much cheerfulness into my voice, hoping to pull him out of his somber mood. He barely glances at me, merely shaking his head. "No, I'm good here." His voice is distant and detached, as if he's miles away from us. His apathy and his sudden isolation feel so out of character that it sends a ripple of unease through me. It's as if he's merely going through the motions, a pale imitation of the vibrant personality he once was. On the hike back to the cabin, Alex falls behind, his steps slow and measured. In the past, he'd be at the center of every conversation, his laughter ringing through the woods. But today, he remains silent, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. When spoken to, he offers quick responses, each word seeming to be dragged out of him. There's a hollow look in his eyes, a lack of emotion that's downright unnerving. It's like watching a familiar movie with all the color drained out. The scenes are the same, and the characters are the same, but everything feels lifeless and disconnected. The hike back is quiet. Our group is noticeably subdued. We exchange glances, each of us silently acknowledging the chilling change in our friend. Later that night, as nightfall descends on the cabin, we gather around the fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on our worried faces. His eyes vacant, lost in some unspoken thought. While Jenna and Max prepare dinner in the kitchen, the rest of us settle in the living area, the mood significantly quieter than the previous night. The laughter and stories have been replaced with whispered conversations and anxious glances. Lisa tries to lighten the mood, but her efforts are met with strained smiles. After dinner, Lisa volunteers to wash up. She vanishes into the kitchen, leaving the rest of us in the living area. We try to keep the conversation going to return to the jovial atmosphere of our reunion, but it's like trying to tune a radio to a frequency that no longer exists. As the minutes stretch into hours, we realize that Lisa hasn't returned. At first, we assume she's just taking her time, maybe finding solace in the routine of washing dishes, but as more time passes, a familiar knot of worry begins to form in our stomachs. Where's Lisa? Sarah finally voices our collective concern, her eyes wide with worry. "I'll go check on her," I volunteer, rising from my seat. The cabin suddenly feels smaller and claustrophobic, the walls seeming to close in on us. I find the kitchen empty, the dishes piled neatly on the rack, the light from the single bulb casting long shadows on the floor. But no sign of Lisa. "Lisa?" I call out, my voice echoing in the empty room. A heavy silence greets me. Quickly, I move towards the kitchen's back door, finding it slightly ajar. A cool night breeze wafts in. Lisa wouldn't have gone out alone, would she? Not after what happened with Alex. My heart hammers in my chest as I return to the living area. The worried faces turn towards me, their expressions mirroring my fear, my voice barely above a whisper. A shared look of fear passes among us. Not again. We can't be going through this again. But the empty kitchen stands as a reminder of the reality we're facing. Lisa is missing, and we're trapped in a nightmarish replay of last night. As we scramble to our feet, flashlights in hand, ready to search for our missing friend, I can't help but glance at Alex. He sits unmoved, his gaze fixed on the fire, his expression unreadable. The cabin, once a place of joyous reunion, feels like a trap now, its walls closing in on us with each passing minute. With flashlights in our hands and worry clawing at our hearts, we spread out to search for Lisa. The forest, usually a place of nostalgic memories, now seems alien, each tree casting ominous shadows in the weak glow of our flashlights. "Lisa!" Ben calls out, his voice echoing in the stillness. We follow suit, our voices ringing out into the night. The only answer we receive is the distant hooting of an owl, its call piercing the eerie silence. We search through the woods, our boots crunching on the undergrowth, the beams from our flashlights slicing through the darkness. But there's no sign of Lisa, no footprints, no trace of where she might have gone. After a couple of hours of fruitless searching, Max suggests we head back to the cabin. She might have returned while we were out, he reasons, although his voice lacks conviction. We all nod, albeit reluctantly, and trudge back to the cabin, a sense of defeat hanging heavy in the air. As the cabin comes into view, its windows glowing dimly in the darkness, a sliver of hope ignites within us. Perhaps Lisa is back, safe and sound, just as Alex was. But stepping inside, we're met with the same unnerving silence, the same empty spaces. Alex sits by the fireplace, seemingly undisturbed by Lisa's disappearance. He glances at us as we step in, his eyes hollow, the mask of indifference firmly in place. It's chilling to see him so disengaged, so unlike the Alex we've known. The rest of the night is a blur of anxious pacing and hushed conversations. We take turns keeping watch, hoping that Lisa will walk through the door, safe and unharmed. As the sun peeks over the horizon, casting long shadows across the cabin, the front door creaks open. Lisa steps through, her face impassive and her eyes vacant. A wave of relief washes over me, quickly replaced by a sense of unease. "Lisa!" Sarah exclaims, rushing to her. But Lisa doesn't respond, doesn't even acknowledge her. Instead, she walks past us as if we're not there. Her clothes are dirty and leaves are tangled in her hair, yet she doesn't seem bothered by it. It's as though she's in a trance, oblivious to her surroundings. My heart sinks. The same vacant stare, the same distant demeanor, just like Alex. "Lisa, where were you?" I ask, stepping in front of her. She stops, her gaze focusing on me. There's no recognition in her eyes, no familiarity. It's as if she's looking right through me. "I was out," she replies, her voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "But where? We were worried. We searched for you all night," Jenna interjects, her voice shaky. Lisa merely shrugs, stepping around me to continue towards her room. As she passes Alex, they share a glance, something fleeting but filled with a strange understanding. It's a silent interaction that sends a shiver down my spine. The rest of us exchange worried glances. It's happening again. As Lisa disappears into her room, shutting the door behind her, we're left standing in the common area, a heavy silence settling around us. The air feels thick with unspoken fear. The reality of our situation hits us harder than before. Whatever is happening, It's not a mere coincidence. It's not fatigue or stress. It's something beyond our understanding, something terrifying. And as we glance at each other, the same thought reflects in our eyes. The day drags on with a growing sense of dread. Our group, once filled with laughter and shared memories, is now divided by an undercurrent of fear and suspicion. It's clear to us all. Alex and Lisa are not the friends we've known. There's something else. Something terrifying. Later in the day, we're huddled in the relative safety of the kitchen. We keep our voices low, our eyes fixed on the closed door that separates us from the entities that wear our friends' faces. Ben is the first to break the silence. He holds his left arm up, his fingers tracing a non-existent wound. "Have any of you noticed this?" he whispers, looking around at us. Both Alex and Lisa have this cut on their left arm. Right here. He points to a spot on the inside of his forearm, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and urgency. He doesn't need to explain for us to understand the gravity of his observation. The air in the room seems to get colder as the implication of his words sinks in. Our eyes meet across the room, each of us reflecting the horror felt by the other. Jenna puts a hand over her mouth, her eyes glassy with terror. Max swears under his breath, running a shaky hand through his hair. Sarah clutches her chest, her breathing ragged. "The exact same spot," Sarah whispers, her voice trembling. "The same size. That can't be a coincidence." "It's not," Max agrees. "It's connected to whatever happened to them. It must be." Suddenly, our friends' transformations seem even more ominous. The identical cuts and the similar behavior, everything points to a single horrifying conclusion. Whatever is happening to them is methodical, almost surgical. With a mix of terror and determination gnawing at our insides, we decide to confront them. We make our way towards the living area where Alex and Lisa are. They're seated at the corner, their backs against the wall, their eyes devoid of any familiar warmth. "What happened to your arms?" I demand, my voice louder than I intended to be, breaking the cabin's silence. All eyes are on us now, on them, on the identical cuts adorning their left arms. Alex glances at Lisa, a strange, silent understanding passing between them. Their eyes then return to us, and it feels like we're looking into an abyss. It's a chilling reminder of how much they've changed. "It was nothing," Alex starts, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Just a small accident." "Yeah?" Lisa chimes in, her voice flat. "Nothing to worry about." "But they're identical." Ben interjects, his voice shaking. "Identical cuts, same spot, same size, that's not a coincidence." "Are you implying something, Ben?" Lisa asks, her eyes narrowing, and something in her voice sends a chill down my spine. "Yeah, that you're not who you say you are," Sarah retorts, her voice filled with a conviction that I wish I could share. Then their features start to shift, their faces blurring as if seen through rippled glass. A wave of disgust rolls over us as their bodies twist and contort, reshaping into something that vaguely resembles our friends but is completely alien. A gasp echoes through the room as we stumble backward, our worst fears confirmed. The creatures in front of us are no longer our friends, but monstrous parodies wearing their skins. We are facing some shape-shifting creatures, and we're trapped in a cabin with them. We scramble away from them, tripping over furniture, scrambling up the stairs and into a room. Slamming the door shut, we push a heavy dresser against it, panting heavily as we press our bodies against the cold wood. The harsh reality of our situation crashes into us like a tidal wave. We are trapped in a cabin with creatures that not only murder their victims, but replicate them in horrifying detail. In the midst of the chaos, Jenna, pale and shaky, pulls an old newspaper clipping from a dust-covered book. Jenna's trembling hands smooth out the worn paper, her eyes scanning the faded print before she starts to read aloud, her voice wavering but clear. "Local cabin owners mysteriously disappear." She reads the headline, pausing for a moment before continuing. "Have been reported missing." Her voice fills the tense silence, the words echoing eerily in the room as she continues. "Last seen by their neighbors 3 weeks ago, their sudden disappearance has left the small community shocked and confused." Local authorities have found no sign of forced entry or struggle at the cabin, and their car remains parked outside the house. She flips the clipping over, revealing a smaller article buried on the back. Cabin curse legends resurface with recent disappearances, the subheading reads. She takes a shaky breath and reads on. The recent disappearances have stirred up old tales among the locals. Legends speak of a sinister entity residing in the surrounding woods. They describe a shapeshifter that feeds on humans, absorbing their essence and assuming their form. Jenna's voice quivers as she finishes reading. Is as old as the hills around us. And while it may be the stuff of campfire stories, the eerie parallels with the McCleary's disappearance cannot be ignored. She sets the newspaper clipping down, the room falling silent except for our ragged breaths. The horrifying implications of what she just read hangs heavy in the room, chilling us to the bone. The cabin, the missing owners, the legends, it all lines up too perfectly with our current situation. And the horrifying possibility stares us right in the face. We're living the nightmare that the McClearys possibly went through. The thought that the previous owners could have suffered a similar fate sends shivers down our spines. Were they too replaced by these creatures? Had their identities stolen and their lives consumed by this monstrous entity? We need to leave now. Max's voice cuts through the horrified silence, his eyes flashing with a determination that anchors us. He's right. If we don't act now, we too will be replaced by these monsters. The weight of the situation presses heavily on us, the chilling words from the newspaper clipping echoing in our minds. We're running out of time, and we can't afford to wait for another one of us to disappear and be replaced. In a desperate bid for survival, we come up with a plan to confront the creatures. We need to lure them into the basement, Ben proposes, his gaze firm. Once they're down there, we lock them in. It's our best chance. We glance at each other, a chilling realization that this is what it has come to. Using one of us as bait to trap the monsters wearing our friends' faces. I'll do it, Max says, his voice steady. The protests are immediate, but he quells them with a look. We don't have time. Let's do this. I nod at the others, signaling for them to be quiet, as I slowly turn the handle of the door we've barricaded ourselves behind. The creaking hinges sound like thunder in the quiet cabin, but I ease it open, praying that the doppelgangers are nowhere near. The hallway is empty, eerily silent, and it sends a shiver running down my spine. We step out one by one, our eyes constantly darting around, our breaths held in a mix of fear and anticipation. Max moves past us to the end of the hall, his hand poised above the basement door handle. Our plan is a dangerous one, using him as bait to lure the creature into the basement. We creep our way towards him. The old wooden floor under our feet groans and squeaks, making us wince each time. We're sitting ducks out here, far from the relative safety of that room we were just in, and the awareness of it makes my heart race. Finally, we reach the basement door. Max casts one last look at us. We watch as he descends, the ominous thud of the closing door echoing in the silent cabin. Now, we wait. Each second stretches into an eternity. The sound of our own heartbeats fills our ears. Then, out of the silence comes a crash from below, a sound so sudden that we all jump. It's followed by a strangled cry. Max. My heart lurches in my chest. We were too late. Our plan to trap the creature had instead led it straight to its next victim. Suddenly, the basement door flies open. Max stands at the top of the stairs, but there's something wrong. His eyes are distant, his movements strange and mechanical. The creature had outsmarted us and used our plan against us. It had taken Max. A chilling wave of realization washes over us. The friends we grew up with and shared countless memories with have been replaced by these monstrous doppelgangers. We need to fight, Jenna whispers, gripping the makeshift weapon in her hand tighter. Armed with whatever makeshift weapons we can find, a kitchen knife, a fireplace poker, a broken chair leg, we confront our once friends. Their familiar faces are twisted into grotesque caricatures. I hold the broken chair leg, positioning myself in front of Alex's doppelganger. His once kind eyes now glint with an unnatural, predatory gleam. He lunges towards me with a suddenness that leaves me reeling, but I manage to sidestep and bring the chair leg down on him. He recoils but quickly recovers, swiping his arm at me. I block, feeling the jarring impact travel up my arms. Nearby, Jenna faces off with Lisa's doppelganger. Every swing she takes is precise, keeping the creature at bay. It lunges at her, but she sidesteps at the last moment, ramming the poker into its side. It screeches, the sound a terrible echo in the confined space. But Jenna stands her ground, her eyes blazing with determination. Ben has the most challenging task, facing off with Max's doppelganger. But Ben, lighter and more agile, uses that to his advantage. He weaves around the creature's attacks, managing to land several hits with his kitchen knife. Each stab, each slash seems to slow it down, even if just a bit. Slowly, bit by bit, we start to gain the upper hand. Jenna lands a solid blow on Lisa's doppelganger, knocking it to the ground. Ben manages to get in close, driving his knife deep into Max's doppelganger. I swing with all the strength I can muster, catching Alex's replica across the face, and it stumbles, giving me the opening I need. With a final desperate effort, I bring the chair leg down on it, and it falls, joining the others on the floor. We stand panting, our bodies shaking with exertion and the aftermath of adrenaline. Our makeshift weapons drop from our hands, clattering on the wooden floor of the cabin. "The only way we can stop them is by burning the cabin," Max states, his voice trembling yet resolute. His words echo in the silence, and we exchange wide-eyed glances. It sounds insane, yet in our desperate situation, also incredibly sane. Once we agree, we set into motion, trying to keep our footsteps light, our breaths hushed. We find bottles of strong liquor in one of the cupboards, probably left behind from some previous reunion. We tear strips from the old curtains, soaking them in the liquor and creating makeshift Molotov cocktails. With one last glance toward the living room, we grab our crude weapons and leave the cabin. Once we are back with the others, Ben takes a deep breath and lights up one of the cocktails. Ben lobs the flaming bottle toward the cabin. It arcs in the air before crashing through a window. The explosion of flames is instantaneous, illuminating the forest around us in an angry orange glow. Immediately, the fire catches, spreading quickly from one part of the cabin to another. Our hearts pound in our chests as we watch the cabin turn into an inferno, trapping the monstrous creatures within. The forest is silent, except for the crackling of the burning cabin. The flames roar, leaping up toward the starlit sky, consuming everything in its path. But as we start to retreat, a chilling sound reaches our ears. A high-pitched, echoing wail emanates from the cabin. Our steps falter, and we turn back towards the burning cabin. There, silhouetted against the flames, we see them. Alex, Lisa, and Max. Or at least the monstrous copies of them. They're pounding on the windows, clawing at the doors, their distorted faces contorted in agony as they try to escape the inferno. But the fire is relentless. The flames dance higher, the heat intensifying, and we watch as the doppelgangers retreat from the windows, disappearing into the blazing interior. Their cries are soon drowned by the crackling of the fire. A chill runs down our spines. But we know it's over. The creatures are trapped, unable to escape the fiery prison we've condemned them to. The cabin burns, the fire reflecting in our wide, traumatized eyes. But we've survived. As the creatures' cries fade away, we can't help but feel a sense of relief washing over us. As we cut across the dewy grass, panting and trembling, we hear the distant wail of sirens. It's a sound that promises help and safety. Our hearts, running high on adrenaline and fear, find a momentary pause. The local authorities, drawn by the smoke of our desperate act, are on their way. We huddle together a safe distance from the burning cabin, our legs finally giving out beneath us. The ground feels cold against our skin, but we hardly notice. Our eyes are locked on the fiery spectacle before us, watching as the cabin succumbs to the flames. "I can't believe we made it," Jenna murmurs, her voice barely rising above the crackling of the fire and the distant siren's wail. It's a sentiment we all share, a heavy truth that we're just beginning to accept. The forest suddenly brightens as the headlights of the first responding vehicles cut through the darkness. Firefighters in heavy gear rush to battle the cabin fire, their hoses raining down torrents of water. Their faces twist with confusion and concern, approach us with a flurry of questions we're not ready to answer. Days later, as we leave the site for the final time, the scorched remains of the cabin feel like a haunting ghost in our rearview mirror. A painful reminder of the horror we faced, the friends we lost. The cabin is behind us, its terrifying secrets reduced to ashes, and we are moving forward. 20 years have passed since I took that job as a fire lookout in the remote forests of California. Back then, I was a teenager eager to escape the mundane routines of everyday life. The idea of spending a summer perched high in a tower surrounded by wilderness seemed like the perfect adventure. I was young, restless, and perhaps a bit naive. I believed that solitude would give me a clearer perspective on life and a chance to figure in who I wanted to be. The tower was located in the Shasta Trinity National Forest, miles away from the nearest town. It was a solitary wooden structure that stood atop a hill, offering a panoramic view of the sprawling forest below. To get there, you had to navigate a narrow, winding road that was barely more than a dirt trail. I remember the drive up, my old truck struggling with the steep inclines, the dense foliage brushing against the sides like a series of soft whispers urging me to turn back. I had found the job listing in a local newspaper. "Fire lookout wanted, must enjoy solitude," it said. The requirements were minimal, just a high school diploma and the ability to live in a remote location for an extended period. The pay wasn't great, but it promised food, accommodation, and most importantly, solitude. I applied without a second thought and was surprised when I got a call for an interview. A week later, I was driving up to my new summer home, my truck loaded with supplies and a head full of romanticized notions about life in the wilderness. The job was straightforward. Keep an eye out for signs of forest fires and report them. I had a radio for communication, binoculars for observation, and a manual that covered the basics of fire lookout duties. I thought it would be an easy job, a peaceful summer spent reading books and enjoying nature. I was partially right. It was peaceful, at least at first. It didn't take long for me to realize that the tower and the forest it overlooked were far from ordinary. Looking back, I can see that my teenage self got more than he bargained for that summer. My first day on the job was filled with contrasting emotions. The excitement was palpable, coursing through my veins as I stepped into the fire lookout tower for the first time. At the same time, the monotony of the remote location settled in. The tower was perched on a hill in the Shasta Trinity National Forest. The view from up there was breathtaking, offering a sweeping panorama of trees, hills, and valleys. Being a fire lookout had always been something I wanted to do. The appeal lay in the solitude it offered, coupled with the sense of responsibility that came with the role. I was to be the eyes of the forest, the first line of defense against wildfires. The idea filled me with a purpose that I had been seeking. The cabin inside the tower was modest but comfortable. Besides the essentials, there were a few shelves stocked with canned food, a first aid kit on the wall, and an old worn-out rug on the wooden floor. A pair of binoculars rested on the windowsill, waiting to be used. The stove was old but functional, and next to it was a small refrigerator. A lantern hung from a hook on the ceiling, providing a warm yellow light that filled the room. But what really drew my attention was an old yellowed piece of paper. It was tucked away in the top drawer of the wooden desk, almost hidden beneath a pile of maps and manuals. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it out. The handwriting was cramped, and the ink had faded, but it was still legible. The list of rules was peculiar, to say the least. It read, The note began with a straightforward warning. To the new lookout, take these rules seriously. They are not a joke and are meant to keep you safe. Don't ever shine your light towards the southwestern tree line. If you hear footsteps on the stairs, don't look to see who it is. Never answer any radio call that comes in after midnight. If you see a figure standing in the clearing during dusk, do not make eye contact. Keep all windows and doors locked between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. What were these rules about? Were they some sort of inside joke among fire lookouts? Or perhaps a way to scare newbies like me? I chuckled at the absurdity of it all. It was almost comical, this list of strange rules in a place where the primary concern was supposed to be forest fires. So I folded the paper neatly, returned it to its original place in the drawer, and closed it. The thought crossed my mind to toss it in the trash, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the weight of the unexplained, or perhaps a respect for the unknown elements of my new job. I shook off the feeling of unease that had crept up on me. This was no time for distractions or flights of fancy. My role here was clear: to watch for signs of fire and to report them immediately. I had been trained for this. I knew what to do. I took a deep breath, looked out the window at the vast forest that stretched as far as the eye could see, and reminded myself why I was here. This was my job, my responsibility, and I was ready to do it, regardless of any odd rules or unsettling feelings. I sat down at the desk, switched on the radio equipment, and prepared myself for the long night ahead. My focus was on the task at hand. Yet a part of me couldn't help but wonder about the unexplained rules. I pushed the thought to the back of my mind. There would be time for that later. For now, I had a job to do. Nightfall arrived faster than I expected, casting the forest into deep shadows. The sky was a blanket of stars, providing just enough light to outline the towering trees. The sounds of the night came alive. Crickets chirped in a constant rhythm, while an occasional owl hooted in the distance. The air was cool, filled with the earthy scent of damp soil and foliage. Inside the tower, boredom had fully set in. The radio sat silent on the desk, its static-filled quietude a testament to the uneventful nature of my shift. A small stack of outdated magazines lay beside it, their pages already turned and stories consumed. The lantern overhead cast a warm glow on the wooden walls, filling the room with a soft yellow light. My eyes landed on the flashlight resting near the window. The list of rules I had found earlier popped into my mind. I chuckled softly. Could shining a light really cause any harm? With that thought, I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it deliberately toward the southwestern tree line. My thumb pressed down on the switch, and the beam of light pierced the darkness. The instant the light touched the trees, a racket of unsettling noises erupted from the forest. It was a chaotic mix of growls, high-pitched shrieks, and the rustling of leaves, as though a multitude of creatures were suddenly roused. My heart immediately started pounding, each beat echoing loudly in my ears. I felt a surge of adrenaline wash over me. Was I hearing one animal, or was it multiple? My mind raced to identify the source. Were these the sounds of known forest animals, or something entirely different? My hand trembled as I switched off the flashlight. The noises ceased as suddenly as they had begun, plunging the forest back into its previous state of nocturnal serenity. I sat there, flashlight in hand, trying to make sense of what just happened. My first thought was to rationalize it. Maybe it was just raccoons, or perhaps a group of nocturnal birds startled by the light. Yet the intensity and variety of the sounds didn't fit with that explanation. My curiosity was not just piqued, it was ignited, fueled by the enigma of the forest's reaction to a simple beam of light. The list of rules, previously a source of amusement, now gained a level of credibility I couldn't easily dismiss. My eyes darted to the desk drawer where I had stored the list. A sense of unease settled over me, conflicting with my rational mind. After the flashlight incident, I sat back down, my fingers idly flipping through the pages of an old hunting magazine. The articles were about gear, techniques, and stories of successful hunts, but my eyes just glossed over the text. My mind kept drifting back to that drawer, to the list of rules I had found. The sense of mystery surrounding the list was gnawing at me. It felt like a puzzle with pieces missing, begging to be solved. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps climbing the wooden stairs to the tower broke the silence. My eyes instinctively darted towards the door. The rule about not looking sprang into my mind, clear as day. A battle raged within me, while an inexplicable sense of caution urged me to heed the warning. In a moment of tense indecision, I gripped the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. I forced my eyes away from the door and stared intently at the radio, its dials and buttons. Suddenly, the most interesting things in the room. The footsteps grew louder and heavier, each step sending a new wave of tension through my body. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. The ensuing silence was so intense it was almost tangible. My chest loosened, and I let out a sigh of relief that I hadn't realized I was holding in. Questions flooded my mind. What was making those footsteps? Why did they stop? And most importantly, why was it so crucial not to look? Time crawled by, each minute stretching longer than the last. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't refocus on my job. My eyes kept darting to the window, scanning the tree line as if expecting an answer to materialize. Then out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. A shadow, larger and darker than any animal I could think of, moved between the trees. It was there for a split second, and then it vanished, swallowed by the darkness of the forest. My senses were on high alert now. I strained my ears and picked up faint, unidentifiable sounds carried on the breeze. Sounds that resembled whispers more than any natural forest noise. My thoughts raced faster than I could process them. Could this place be haunted? Was I in the territory of some dangerous, unidentified animal? Or was it something else, something that couldn't be easily categorized or explained? The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in as my imagination ran wild. The list of rules, once a curiosity, now felt like a lifeline that I had foolishly ignored. The air in the room grew thicker, heavy with unanswered questions and a mounting sense of unease. What had I gotten myself into? The rest of the night was a blur of heightened senses and racing thoughts. I tried to busy myself with tasks, anything to keep my mind off the strange occurrences. I tested the radio, making sure it was set to the correct frequencies. I even took to cleaning, wiping down the countertops and sweeping the floor. But no matter what I did, my eyes kept returning to the window and my ears strained for any out-of-place sounds. Around midnight, I decided to make some coffee, hoping the caffeine would keep me alert. As the aroma filled the cabin, I felt a slight sense of normalcy return. I sat down with my mug and took a sip, relishing the warmth and bitterness. Just as I was about to convince myself that I had imagined all the weird events, the radio buzzed to life. Static filled the room, followed by an incoherent voice. My heart sank as I remembered the rule about not answering radio calls after midnight. I looked at the clock. It was 12:05 a.m. Without touching the radio, the voice stopped, and the static died down. For the next couple of hours, nothing out of the ordinary happened. Maybe the coffee helped, or perhaps the absence of any more strange occurrences calmed my nerves. Eventually, I felt my eyelids grow heavy. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 4 a.m. I remembered the rule about keeping doors and windows locked between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. A quick check confirmed they were secure. Feeling a sense of relief, I decided it was safe to catch a few hours of sleep. I lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and pulled the blanket over me. Sleep came surprisingly quick, and for those few hours I was asleep. Eventually, the first rays of morning light streamed through the window, pulling me from my slumber. I sat up, momentarily disoriented, before the events of the previous night came rushing back. A glance at the clock confirmed it was well past 6 a.m. I got up, stretched, and walked over to the window. The forest looked different in the daylight, less menacing but still filled with secrets. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat down at the desk. The list of rules lay there, a constant reminder of the unknown. Despite the unsettling experiences, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. I was, after all, here for a job, a responsibility that included more than just watching for fires. As I looked out over the trees, bathed in the soft morning light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of discovering something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. I dressed, put on my boots, and stepped outside to breathe in the fresh morning air. The forest was awake, alive with the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. I climbed the stairs back to the tower, ready to face another day and whatever mysteries it might hold. And the events of the first night, a mix of caution and curiosity, wrestled within me. The strange happenings were an undeniable warning, but my curiosity was too strong to ignore. Rather than leaving things to chance, I opted for a more organized method to delve into the mysteries surrounding me. The idea of systematically testing each rule entered into my thoughts. I rummaged through my bag and pulled out a journal. I initially brought for nature sketches and observations. It was about to serve a very different, perhaps darker role. For my experiment, the first rule was up. Don't ever shine your light towards the southwestern tree line. Though I had already broken this rule, I felt a need to probe further. With my flashlight in one hand and the journal open on the table, I waited for the sun to sink below the horizon. When darkness finally engulfed the forest, I pointed the flashlight in the prohibited direction and clicked it on. The reaction from the forest was instantaneous, much like my first night, but with key differences. The strange symphony of noises erupted again, only this time the volume was amplified, almost as if it was filled with irritation or maybe even anger. The shadows too had changed. They moved in a frenzied manner, darting between the trees as if agitated by the light. The sight was unsettling. These are not normal animal behaviors. Something else is at play here. I hastily scribbled down every detail in my journal, my hand barely keeping up with my racing thoughts, and switched off the flashlight. Having completed the first test, I found myself grappling with a blend of fear and fascination. On one hand, the increasingly intense reactions from the forest were a clear sign that I was meddling with forces I didn't understand. On the other hand, I was intrigued. I needed to learn more, and searched through my journal. The neat handwriting had turned into a hurried scrawl as I jotted down my observations, a testament to the growing tension. I was at a crossroads. Part of me wanted to halt the experiment, to respect the rules and the entity or entities they were designed to protect me from. Another part wanted answers, driven by a curiosity that had always been a defining part of who I was. Rule 2 dealt specifically with the mysterious footsteps ascending the tower's stairs. As the days passed, these occurrences became more frequent. Initially, they were sporadic, maybe once a night. But then they became a regular event, sometimes happening multiple times in a single night. The sound was distinct, the slow, deliberate steps of what seemed to be a heavy-footed creature or person. It was as if whatever was climbing the stairs wanted to be heard. The rules warning was unmistakable. Don't look. Something deep within my gut, an instinctual sense of caution that went beyond logic, underscored the importance of this rule. It was as if my subconscious was communicating a primal fear, a dire warning not to break this particular guideline. Who or what is making those footsteps? The question was a splinter in my mind, gnawing at me each time the steps resumed their slow climb. The urge to peek was nearly overwhelming. Each time the footsteps began, my eyes would involuntarily dart toward the door. My heart would pound in anticipation. Could it be an animal, a person, or something else entirely? To resist the temptation, I developed coping mechanisms. The radio on the desk became my go-to focal point. I would stare at its dials and knobs, even sometimes reaching out to touch them as if the tactile sensation could anchor me in reality. At other times, I would flip through my journal, rereading previous entries, or even doodling aimlessly, anything to distract my attention away from the door. But despite these efforts, my ears remained acutely tuned to the sound of each footstep, counting them as they ascended and then ceased. As the days went by, my journal filled up with observations. The more rules I broke, the more active the creature became. I only caught glimpses of it through my binoculars. It was a shadowy figure that moved with incredible speed, making it hard to discern any features. Each time I saw it, it was closer to the tower than before. It's actually real. What is it, though? A guardian of the forest? Or something else? The creature began revealing itself more boldly as I continued breaking the rules. I remember the night I broke the rule about answering radio calls after midnight. A distorted voice came through, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. That was the night I saw the creature closer to the tower than ever before. I was scared out of my wits, but at the same time I felt a sense of awe and wonder. I'm actually witnessing something most people would never believe. Is it dangerous? Or just as curious about me as I am about it? Despite the escalating strangeness and potential danger, I felt like I was piecing together a complex puzzle. Each rule seemed to correlate with specific behaviors of the cryptid, almost as if the rules were set by the creature itself, or perhaps by previous fire lookouts who had observed its behavior. I'm not the first to experience this. How many before me have known about this creature? Why isn't this public knowledge? But as the creature got closer to the tower with each rule I broke, my sense of wonder started to give way to a feeling of dread. I began to question the wisdom of what I was doing. Am I poking the bear here? What if this creature is dangerous? The thought shook me, but the scientist in me wanted to complete the experiment. I couldn't stop now. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening here. The last straw was the night I kept the windows and doors unlocked between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., clearly breaking another rule. That night, the creature came so close to the tower that I could hear its heavy breathing. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. A few days later, the rule about not looking at whoever or whatever was ascending the stairs had loomed over me like an ominous cloud. And if my gut feeling was accurate, the most potential for danger. Tonight's the night. I'm going to do it. I'm going to break this rule. A complex mix of emotions settled within me, dread at what I might discover, mixed with an odd form of excitement at finally unlocking the mystery. I took a deep breath. The timing seemed almost scripted. Just as I finalized my decision, the sound of footsteps began to resonate. Each step was deliberate and calculated, creaking under the weight of whatever entity was making its way up. It was as if the creature too had been waiting for this moment, for this confrontation. My heart thumped loudly in my chest. Every beat seemed to sync with each creak of the stairs. My eyes were drawn magnetically toward the door, the final barrier between me and the mystery I'd been probing. Journal entries and restless nights have led me to this. It's time to meet the unknown face to face. My hand automatically clenched into a fist. I wasn't sure if it was an unconscious act of preparing to defend myself, or a physical manifestation of my dwindling courage trying to hold onto it for just a few seconds longer. The footsteps continued their slow ascent, growing louder and more defined as they approached the top of the staircase. Each sound seemed to reverberate through the air, filling the room with a palpable sense of impending revelation. It was as if the world held its breath, waiting for this singular moment of truth. The footsteps were now just one step away. I could feel my pulse in my throat and hear the blood rushing in my ears. This was it. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I turned my head to look, breaking the one rule that I had been most reluctant to violate. The door slowly creaked open, breaking the heavy silence that filled the room. Before me stood the cryptid, a figure almost beyond description. It towered over me, clearly taller than any human I'd ever seen. Its body was a bizarre combination of fur and scales, as if nature couldn't decide what it should be. But what caught my attention the most were its eyes. They glowed a soft yet unsettling shade of blue that seemed to pierce the darkness. Despite its terrifying appearance, the creature made no aggressive moves. It simply stood there, locking eyes with me. For a heartbeat, it felt as if time had frozen, as if the universe paused to witness this unlikely meeting. We were two creatures from entirely different realms, brought together by circumstance and perhaps curiosity. It's not making a move to harm me, it's just staring, as puzzled by my presence as I am by its. Breaking the tense silence, the cryptid issued a low sound that was more akin to a murmur than a growl. It was an ambiguous noise, neither welcoming nor threatening. With one last lingering look, the creature began to back away, each step deliberate, as it made its descent down the stairs. My eyes stayed glued to its body until it was swallowed by the enveloping darkness of the night. As the door settled back into its frame with a soft creak, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My body felt like a bundle of frayed nerves. My legs were shaky, and my mind was a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions. That's when the realization washed over me, as clear and as startling as a bolt of lightning. The rules that I had found, the ones I had so cavalierly chosen to break one by one, were not mere tales meant to scare the new recruit. They were a carefully constructed set of guidelines, a framework that allowed for the delicate coexistence of human and the creature. After that night, my perspective underwent a fundamental change. The thrill of defying the rules and probing the unknown was replaced by a sobering understanding of why those rules existed in the first place. I had thought they were just about human safety, a way to protect the new guy on the job. I was wrong. These rules were a complex framework designed for the well-being of all the forest's inhabitants, so I made a conscious decision to adhere to them. My compliance wasn't driven by fear or the desire to avoid confrontation. It came from a respect for the intricate balance of life that my previous actions had thrown into disarray. Once I started obeying the rules, the environment around me seemed to transform. The forest exuded a sense of peace and harmony that I hadn't sensed before. This got me wondering, had the forest always had this serene atmosphere and my actions disturbed it? Or was this a new development, a direct result of my altered behavior? Moreover, the cryptid appeared to recognize and respond to my change in attitude. Gone were the eerie footsteps up the stairs of the tower in the dead of night. The radio remained silent, devoid of any inexplicable interference or mysterious calls, and the sightings of shadowy figures moving among the trees ceased. It was as if the cryptid was acknowledging my newfound respect for the rules and responding in kind. I felt that we had reached an unspoken agreement, a mutual understanding that neither of us would cross the boundaries that allowed us both to inhabit this space. As the days stretched into weeks, the sense of peace that had settled over the forest showed no signs of dissipating. The absence of eerie occurrences, the tranquility of the surroundings, and the muted activities of the forest's creatures all seemed to affirm that this was the natural state of things. This equilibrium is how the forest is meant to be. It's the environment where both the cryptid and I can coexist without conflict. While the cryptid had ceased its more overt activities, it was not entirely invisible. Periodically, usually around the time when the sky took on the warm, muted colors of dusk, I would spot it. Always at a respectful distance, it would appear among the trees, momentarily visible in the fading sunlight. These sightings were never prolonged. They felt more like brief check-ins, a way for the creature to affirm that the equilibrium was still in place. The most remarkable moment came about a month later. I was sitting in the tower, lost in a book, when I heard a soft rustle outside the window. Glancing out, I saw the cryptid standing at the edge of the clearing. It was closer than it had ever been since our confrontation, yet I felt no fear. Our eyes met, and the creature gave what could only be described as a nod before turning and disappearing into the forest. That was the moment I knew for sure. We had reached an understanding, a mutual respect that transcended words or explanations. As the days on the calendar dwindled down, I couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. My time in the Fire Lookout Tower was coming to an end, and the reality was starting to sink in. On my last night, the forest seemed unusually still, as if aware that a chapter was closing. I sat there in the quiet, reflecting on the encounters, the rules, and the enigmatic creature that had been both a source of fear and a teacher of great lessons. Just when I was lost in my thoughts, I heard it, footsteps on the stairs. The sound was familiar, a sequence of creaks and thuds that had once filled me with dread. This time, however, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I don't need to look. I know what this means. True to the rule I had once broken, I didn't turn my head to see who or what was there. Instead, I focused on the radio equipment that had sat silently on the desk for so many nights. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, lingered for a moment, and then retreated, fading away into the depth of the night. The next morning, as I prepared to leave, I felt a sense of peace envelop me. I packed my belongings, took one last look around the tower that had been my home, and began my descent. Each step felt heavy, weighed down not by regret, but by the gravity of the experiences I was carrying with me. I had done my part, upheld my end of the agreement. I had maintained the balance of the forest, and in doing so, honored the unique relationship that had formed between me and the creature. As I reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped into the clearing, the forest seemed to greet me with a serene silence. I took a moment to breathe it all in. I didn't see the cryptid that morning, but I didn't need to. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel that this experience would stay with me forever, shaping my understanding of the world in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. Hey, my dear friends. If you're finding joy in our content and would like to support our channel, please contemplate subscribing and hitting that like button. Your support means the world to us and will enable us to bring forth more captivating and fresh content. And a beautiful comment, as striking as the beauty of your eyes, my handsome friend, would truly touch our hearts.